This is a passionate episode. This is an episode where you're going to see two DPs talk about their craft, talk about their love for their craft, talk about their approach at their craft, and talk about why we do what we do. When Jason and I first met, we were just starting our journey into our careers, from what we thought made us great cinematographers to where we are now and how we see the industry today. We would talk for hours and hours every single time we met about gear, about the industry, about things we wanted to do. And now, as evolved cinematographers, as full-time cinematographers, it's amazing to see how things have changed. So if you're a gear lover, if you're an emerging DP, if you're just all about filmmaking, this is an episode you're going to want to tune into. So welcome to the Apple Box Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Lau, and I'm sitting across my guest of the hour, Jason D'Souza. Let's get into it. All right, let's just start with who is Jason as a human, as a DP?
Okay, so I as a DP, who am I as a DP? I came up shooting documentary, so that influences me a lot.
Interesting.
And similar to you, like I was shooting doc all travel based until the pandemic.
Yeah.
So a lot of how I light came from just like looking at what light was available.
Interesting.
And just like turning off practicals, turning on practicals, and like trying to
seeing
shape
what
by
the
that.
space is giving you, type of thing.
Which
yeah.
was great. Like the more like after documentary, I'd like listen to Deacon's podcast and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and a lot of that in like scouting, they'd be like, just look at what the space is.
Yeah.
Which was great because that like that trained me a lot because I just didn't have the option. It was just like, where is the sun and what is the light going to be like?
Yeah.
And that shaped a lot of the way I worked. I am a super moody DP.
I noticed that.
And I get like, my friends always be like, yo, if the waveform is like 0, then you're happy.
You love that deep, dark, like moody with the filter. I noticed that you're a big filter guy.
Big filter guy.
What filter do you like?
I've if I can get away with it, I really like a half black pro mist.
Half. You go in.
Which is thick.
Yeah, that's thick.
But like you can really work it in the grade because it actually helps you retain a lot of shadow.
Yeah.
And then you can push it back down if you want, but you get a cleaner shadow.
Right. But what lens do you use with that usually?
Depends. Like if I'm shooting, if it's low budget, it'll be Sigma, like classic 1835,
so you can throw
1500,
a half and it'll be fine.
And it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I've done like super speeds with like a double fog and a half pro mist. And it's sick. Like I love that combination, but it's like it's also a lot. But like that piece was like, I'm a friend who's a magician. It was like vintage. We're like going super artsy, but like that, like a super speed halation, flaring plus the filtration.
Yeah.
Like I just found broke down the image in such an original way, which felt like even outside of a great, you put like 709 on that, and it has its own look that feels like the time in the piece.
Right.
And that felt right for me.
Do you ever get scared that like perhaps that's not what the clients are looking for? Like, because you are technically baking it in at that point, no? Like you're baking in like quite a bit of halation and quite a bit of softness that, you know, nowadays at least, I know like just working like normal corporate jobs, everyone wants that sharp, you know, modern look.
Clean look.
Yeah. So like, do you ever get scared that like you doing this is like, or do you like make it clear to be like, listen, if you're hiring me, we're filtering the shit out of this.
Well, like I would say I filter everything.
Okay.
But it's specifically for vintage stuff, like for period stuff. I really like if it is period, I really like to like throw in filters.
Yeah.
I love the master primes, so I like a clean.
So
like
that's
nothing,
very clean,
super clean.
Yeah.
So the last short I did, we shot master primes, pretty much often at like T4. And that was like
super sharp then.
Super sharp.
Right.
Super deep.
Yeah.
And like feels really like real.
Yeah.
And I didn't need much halation or anything from that.
Right.
I think I used like an 1/8 Pro Mist for
just
some flashback stuff. And
okay.
like there was some stuff where we were like shooting right into a window that I wanted to like halate a bit.
Yeah.
But that stuff, I don't want to use filters then. When the lenses are too nice, you kind of want to just let the lenses characters.
Especially when you go master prime, you go master prime for a reason.
Yeah.
Like you're going there because you want that clean look.
Yeah, that smooth, clean look.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to break it down.
It makes no sense in a way to get master primes at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing with the super speeds in a way. Like, if I was gonna shoot super speeds, I actually probably shouldn't have filtered them that much,
right?
Because you take so much away from the character of the lens by like doing all of that.
Yeah.
For the client and stuff, like I am a big planner and tester, so like I tested that filter, a bunch of filter stacks, and a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
To be like, what does it look? What kind of halation do I get? Like shooting into windows, shooting into lamps, shooting into anything that would halate the image, and then was like, this is a chart kind of like what the different effects are.
Right.
And this is what we would get from it.
Yeah.
And like showed it to the director and the producer and was like, is this good?
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking, this combination.
Yeah.
And even in that, you can kind of break that down in post. Like there is some saving it, but it's a very intentional choice. You are baking a lot into the image.
Yeah, you are.
Like, you can do halation in post.
Yeah,
so
you
like,
can do it in post, but like the old school, like I don't know, is it old school? The old school mentality of like do it right in camera. Yeah, don't fix it in post. Kind of comes in. I'm still that way too. I'm like, if you're gonna do it intentionally. I'm not so much of a post guy, but I know that one thing that like one of the challenges that even I still face to this day when you're doing like client work is just like everyone wants the same thing, and how do you put in that little bit of your own touch in there and explain to them like, trust me, this is gonna look good. Like the amount of times I've like the other day I told someone, I was like, I texted my client, I was like, this would look really cool with like a blue background. Do you mind if I just take a stair and put a blue background? Not that you know what a stair is, but like then you can put a blue background. I'm like, let's play it safe and no. Do you ever run into those type of challenges in your work?
Yeah, all the time. Like one, like I like moody stuff, and often I'm like battling kind of like shape, or like trying to find a world in which it's like shape that I'm happy with. I don't know, like I often think about like reconcile with myself whether like it's my own like mental health and that like I see the world in such a dark place, or like where that like feel comes from to like want that kind of darkness or fall off. But I think that's like a thing that I often have to wrestle with client is being like, I think it needs this level of darkness or this like lack of whatever, this lack of like bright high key lighting, because of the intentionality, even if it's like a short film, and they're like, we want everything to be safe, and we want everything to be exposed like super bright or whatever. I'm trying to be like, maybe just like the light on and above the stove is enough for that scene, and you don't actually need this full wrap around the face. Maybe it's just the side light. Like I always am trying to be like, if I can just get an eye light, I can get away with a lot less. But then it's tough to justify from what people are comfortable with and what they feel like is normal. A big thing that I try and do is like have an archive of like stuff I've done on my phone, and try and be like, instead of being like, what do you think about like a blue background? It's like, do you like this?
Almost like a photo book.
Yeah, exactly. So I can actually be like, because a lot of times that communication barrier between like cinematographer and client is like big. Because it's so technical, and they just know like what they like or what they've seen before. So a big thing I try and do is be like, do you like the way this looks? Do you like this thing? Because if I'm like, sometimes it's like, oh, we want to build like a softbox up top with sky panels. I'm like, oh, I have these Hudson Spiders that would actually be faster and better, but like we want this thing. But instead I could be like, hey, do you like the way that this lighting looks from a setup I did before? And if they're like, yeah, then I'm like, great, I know how.
So without trying to get into like the gear politics of everything, you're just trying to show them a look and sell them on the look and be like, this can achieve that look.
This can achieve that look. This is what that look would be, and it'd be like this look plus this or this, depending on what the mood is. And I find that helps sell an image so much more to have those references. And then I always try and like, I'm a big lighting plan guy. So I'll always have these lighting plans and be like, this is the setup and this is the image. So like we can achieve this with this.
So let's get into that lighting plan. Like what do you do specifically to plan prep for work?
Okay, so one is like when I was coming up from documentary, I was always like kind of intimidated by narrative setups.
Yeah.
Because
It's quite the opposite work. You're running gunning.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so available light, and like so much of it is because you're handicapped in the resources you have. So this is what we're doing. But it's you kind of have no excuses in a world where you're like, you can have whatever you want.
Yeah.
So then why did you pick X, Y, and Z?
Right.
So I wanted to be much more intentional with what I was picking and how I was lighting stuff. So I got really into just like consuming lighting plans and seeing how people were lighting so that I could use that just as like a point of reference for myself.
Right.
And then from that, it was like super helpful for me to then use that to like translate for my gaffers and grips. And I would,
it's your communication tool.
and I would go, okay, this is the lighting plan for the day. This lighting plan sometimes for like the whole short or the whole thing, and be like, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah.
And then on the day too, it's super easy to reference. Hey, this is the next setup, so you can start moving units that aren't in play there. You can start prepping like cable for lights to land and all of that stuff, and you're not like trying to communicate that on the day.
Yeah.
And like wasting time with that kind of dialogue.
Do you use any specific like apps or anything like that?
I keep floating around between like what's the best thing
it's hard
to
to find.
use.
There's so many.
I right now using I think Light Designer.
Okay.
Which is an iPad app. And it's okay.
Yeah.
There's like some stuff that's great. Like it's just like kind of efficient, and that you can like I have my own lights. I have my own kit. Like so I can pre-build all my favorite lights as my whole kit, and then be like I can add extras. And then I'm not sorting through every possible fixture that exists. I just know what my package is, and I can throw stuff in there.
Yeah.
But there's stuff that like, if you click something a specific way, the whole thing crashes. Then you're like, great.
Oh.
But like the other world of that is like using like Illustrator or like Concepts is another great one.
Concepts, I use that one, yeah.
How do you like Concepts?
I like it. I don't pay for it, so I can't put in my own individual fixtures on there. But honestly, it's great so far. It does the job.
Which is stuff like the spiders and stuff. Like,
yeah,
nobody has that.
Nobody has that stuff.
That.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even Shot Designer, I find is the same thing. Like you have very limited in terms of like the fixtures.
The fixtures that are there
that you can choose. So sometimes you'd want something specific and you can't because it just like this is not the case. But like I want to put a 20 by 20 neg, but there's no 20 by 20 neg. There's a like an 8 by 8 silk, but they don't, like you don't know.
There's
like,
no thing.
There's no, and you have to label it.
You have
like,
to go in and label it, and things are like grouped all weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know, like I feel like Photoshop is like the best for like stacking and like orienting and stuff, but then like it's so tedious to like build units.
It takes
and, like,
longer.
All of that stuff. So I don't know what the best. I actually still haven't found like the thing that I like. That's the best tool. There's another thing like Serve. What is it on Instagram? Serve something with a C. They have like a blue icon, and they post all of the people's lighting designs and their shots, and the lighting designs look really good because they actually have more than just like PNG art. It's like actually like a kind of more colored in design.
Sidus Link has one too for aperture.
Really?
The Sidus Link app, yeah.
You can do like
you can actually do a lighting diagram with it now.
What the hell?
Yeah,
I didn't know. Is that new?
Semi new, I guess. I've used it once I on my phone, but I was like, I can't do this on my phone.
Yeah,
so like you need an iPad. Yeah, it's so small. But yeah, they have one. They use it in their like 4-minute breakdowns.
Okay.
Yeah, when they're like, then they have this light here, and then they show the diagram. That's from Sidus Link.
Oh, I didn't know that was from Sidus Link. I thought that they were they were using the Sidus Link.
Yeah, you could check it out, see if you like it.
Yeah. I also during the pandemic I made a website, Set Notes, and that's why I also like post all of I'm trying to archive all of my stuff.
Oh, nice.
What I want to be able to do is like it's a whole bunch of stuff on Instagram that is like lighting plans and shots.
Yeah.
What I want to be able to do is kind of build like an archive that you can search based on what your problems you're trying to solve.
Oh, interesting.
So like what the setup is and what units were used. But if you're like facing south facing windows, what are those setups? And you actually have them tagged by that.
Wow.
And you can see how people.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. But it's like one thing I'm trying to do, especially when I'm doing stuff or I'm on set, is like just like capture what those things are and just archive it and like do it passively. As I'm working. So it's not like I gotta take 6 months off and like do this thing. And it's a thing that I just like, that's just like helpful for me. I like lighting plans like that, and I like to reference it. And it's never like oh, you need to recreate this thing. But there's always like something in the way that somebody did something that makes sense, that allows you to solve a problem.
Right. But I find also, like, me and Nick talked about this in our last episode about like lighting plans and giving out lighting plans and all that kind of stuff. You know, some people would be like, oh, you're giving away all your information, but it's in a lot of ways, like, there's so much more to learn from that. Like, just knowing where to put a light doesn't mean anything. It's coming up with
why,
the concept, why, the intention behind everything, right? So, you know, I've always said, like, lighting plans are great, lighting breakdowns are amazing. It's really, really valuable source, but nothing beats experience.
Yeah,
you know,
there's, and even for me, like working with Nick, it's like seeing him problem solve on the fly. Like, that actually helps me problem solve with my stuff, because it's not like on paper it doesn't mean as much as seeing something not work and then be like, why isn't this working? That fix is huge. Working with somebody, like Deacons talks about it, like when he was trying to do this whole setup with an overhead rig and then couldn't, and then broke for lunch, and then you just lit it with gem balls, and it was like, you just having the ability.
But that's experience. Like, that's Roger knowing what his options are, what his tools do,
and that he was wrong, and then knowing how to solve it. Yeah, and you can't learn that from lighting plans.
You cannot learn that from lighting plans. Like, you have to go up there and make these mistakes, or learn it from a DP that you're probably mentoring you. You know, like, you can't. There's so much to learn in this whole craft, and a lot of it, I've always said, was, you know, it's partly creative, but there's so much more. How do you communicate with your team? How well do you handle direction? How good do you even handle, let's say, a producer? How well do you handle budget restraints and figuring out not just lighting plans, gear lists, team, you know, like figuring all that kind of stuff out.
Like that stuff is crazy. Like, I want to get better at that too, is like the logistics of like, okay, what do we need? How can we rent it affordably? How can we like have stuff on certain days that we only need for certain days? How do you get rid of stuff?
It's almost like you got to be kind of a producer.
Because you have to think about like, what are our daily things? What are the days that we have big setups? What are the days that we have small setups? What's the expensive stuff that we should actually like send back?
Exactly.
That whole skill set. And like you said, like working with producers, working with directors, like that language, like so much of it is just communication.
So much is communication. And also so much of it is also, I find, trying to sometimes understand when to put your ego behind you and kind of be like, you know, like, this would look so sick if I lit it like this, but then it just doesn't fit the story. And you have to like be like, oh, you know, like, I guess we'll add a light here. You know?
I hate and love that. It's like, you like, sometimes you get attached to a certain thing that you want to do. Like, technically from the technical side of the DP, but like from the emotional side, it makes no sense. And you like try and make that work. And then you're like, why am I actually, you look at it, you're like, why am I doing this?
Exactly. Do you have any like recent experiences where you had to battle your ego?
It was, I was doing this short film, and I was, I just wanted it to be really moody in this kitchen, and it was like, it did make sense.
When you're talking real moody, like, what are you talking here? Like 30 IRE like the key.
What it was is like, I can send you it, but like,
okay.
It's basically like, it's in the house of a basement apartment.
And
they're like really upset. They're having a fight between mom and daughter. She wants to move out, and she's having a fight with her mom while she's cooking pie in the kitchen. She always cooks for her birthday. So like, there's this like shot in the kitchen where I'm like really pushing light in through the window.
I see that.
And I wanted to just leave that slash as the space, and then use the bounce off the fridge to return as a key.
Right. Interesting.
And it shaped them enough. But like, just the problem was that like, it felt right for the mood of like them having this fight in the space that the daughter wants to leave in. So you feel like you want to leave.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like, you can't, like, I was like, that feels right artistically alone. But like you can't read the performances enough from that space. As a still, maybe it communicates a lot about what this scene is, but it does so much damage to like the actors, to, like, their performances, and how are you seeing them emote? So I was really fighting myself on like how much shape to give the space to not make it feel like a bright, happy basement, but to allow the actors to emote and like feel their faces and feel their presence, and reacting to their fight. And I was trying to be like, but I just want this like really crushed, like dark, moody.
So what was
scene.
You had a like conversation with the director, I guess, and the director was like, "Nah, you know, Jay, we need to."
No, I had a conversation with myself.
Fair enough.
It was literally like I just had that lighting set up, and I had like, you know, the MCs and the counters and blah blah blah. And I was just like, I really want this to work. And I just feel like it's not right. Like it's not actually right for the story. It's not right for the for what it is. Even though like I like it. But it's still not the best thing for what this piece is artistically.
Interesting. So do you have like an approach? Would you say that you have a certain style? I know it's hard to describe styles, you know, but like, would you say you have an approach or style to your work?
Right now, I feel like I change like what my approach is. Over time, just as I learn more, like I'm just trying different things. I'm evolving. Right now, my big thing is like really trying to light more with hard light and be more comfortable with that. And feel more authentic in like how I actually feel like hard light fills spaces. And then shape with soft light from there. About where hard light comes in, and then like being logical about where that bounces and how I think that feels for the story.
Because I've had the same exact approach like recently. Like it's kind of like hip. You know, I feel like when you start as cinematographer, you just love soft light. It's just like softbox everything. You know? Like,
it looks beautiful.
It looks beautiful. Everything looks pretty. And then as you get along, you're like, you get fascinated about hard light. And I resonate with what you just said, because like that's been my kind of like my approach lately, is just kind of sitting there like, you know, this is untraditional, and you know, you're not going to smack a hard light, you know, typically at somebody, you know, say the shoulder or whatever, but it's realistic. And I kind of like it,
and it feels right.
And it feels right. You know, this is what they would look like in a scene. You know, as long as I get my levels right and I don't blow any highlights out, or you know, I get my contrast. It's not distracting. This is interesting, and I usually get a lot of like kickback on that sometimes. Like, you know, it's a little, it's like that's not normal, or like, you know, like let's soften it. I was like, nah, this looks right. Like, to me, you know?
It feels right. It feels right. The more you light like that, then the more you notice light. The more they kind of build on each other. So now my process is kind of like, okay, like really, process is overarching for like. What I do is I'll like really read a script, and then I'll like write down in the script how I think I feel about the story and the characters, and how I see myself in it, and how I visualize that. And then I'll write down kind of like what the camera language is for each character. So like if I think one character is kind of like we're always shooting them clean, one character is always over the shoulder, like one character feels like they have a certain lens that fits more with them. And then from there I'll try and really break down the lighting in like terms of sun position, lamps, and then faces. And like what are those three things for the space? And
you start with usually sun position, I'm assuming. Like you start with where the motivation's coming from.
From outside. So where's outside? And what is that doing? What time of day is it? What feels like that? And then once you have that, then it's like, okay, well, where are lamps then in the space? And where are lamps then is a huge thing for where our face is. And then that combination is kind of like, how do you allow sun position and lamps to give you a collaboration of hard light and soft light to light faces that feel like they're the right lighting for the mood, or for like whatever the scene is. If it's a fight, if it's loving, you know, if it's like if it's loving, romantic, then you're like I'm really trying to push hard light into the space so that it bounces as a soft light onto the face and like really creates that separation, so that when you go into the close-ups, you can like really push a soft light that sells it. But if it's like, you know, angry and like you want shadows or whatever, then I'm like really trying to figure out where the sun is to like portray that, and you're getting like hard edge lights and then like a soft fill, and like can I allow myself, big thing I try and do is like, can I allow myself to minimize the setup time for close-ups, for sweetening that up. you know, if it's hard light,
So
or if it's a hair light, you bring in a
right.
bounce instead of bringing in a new lamp.
Right. So you light for the wide, so that when you light for the close up, it's just a matter of just bringing in like either a bounce or bringing in a poly or whatever.
Exactly.
Just
like
to like quick.
Just a quick, and sweeten it up. And like hard light really allows you to do that. But I feel like once if you start with soft light, it just goes everywhere, and there's no really shaping. Then you need the 10 floppies shaping everything around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what do you typically work on in terms of your recent projects? Are you find yourself more narrative or more commercial nowadays?
Recently I've been doing a lot more short films. Okay. Which has been good.
Yeah.
Short films and music videos, I'd say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay. What do you like more?
I always loved music videos coming from documentary, because I was like, you can do whatever you want lighting wise.
So experimental.
And so much stuff I wanted to try.
Nothing has to make sense.
Nothing has to make sense. And like, there's stuff like stuff in my reel, I think still that I was just like, cool. Like, what color palette? Like on the day, like, what is the color palette for this scene? Purple and red. Cool. Yeah. What is color palette? And like, you just don't get to do that with short film. Yeah. And like, I was so kind of like constrained from documentary, just being what it was, that I really wanted to play with light in music videos. But now I think I'm trying. I'm enjoying like the process of like finding myself in a script, and like finding intention in my lighting, and finding the evolution of the camera, the evolution of the lighting, in that you're allowed to do a narrative. So I'm liking short films way more. Yeah.
I find that like that's intentional work is always more satisfying. It's more fulfilling. I find
even if it doesn't work out, it's like I really got to learn a lot, put a lot of myself into that.
Exactly. It's kind of like the Deakins thing, I guess, where he says like cinematography is not always about a pretty image, right? It's what suits for a story, and if you can't see it, you can't notice cinematography, then it's almost like you did your job.
Yeah.
Like the better you did your job. And I always find myself trying to chase that nowadays. It's a little difficult because it's always tempting to be like, let's just add a beam of light in there and haze it up, baby.
Yeah.
Let's go. Like
exactly. Like that's the side of like commercial that it's like it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But like you notice that it's beautiful, and I still wrestle with that. That's a really good thing that like I'm trying to do, and that's why I'm like always trying to look at like not what's beautiful, but what life looks like.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard light coming in, bouncing off walls, and doing gross things. But then trying to like, it's really tough to take your ego out of it and be like, hard. I want to feel like I don't want anybody to notice what I did here.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like that's
if like an everyday person looked at it and be like, what's so special about this? It looks normal.
Yeah.
Like one of the best compliments I've ever gotten on a set one time was I was using M40s onto bounce boards, right? And I was bouncing it as like window light, right? So outside, giant M40, bam, bounce board. Didn't have a lot of space in the backyard, so I needed to use bounce, right? And then when the I forgot what was it, Key or was he the guy? I can't remember. But came in, he walked in and he was just like, "Do you want me to turn on the lights?" I'm like, "They are on."
Yeah,
and I'm like, that's the best compliment I could have ever gotten.
Yeah, there's the same thing when I was doing that kitchen scene.
Yeah,
and the actress was just like, "Is that the sun doing that?"
Yeah, that's the best.
And I was like, "No, that's my lighting."
Yeah, and that's how you know
that you think it's the sun.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you know you did a good job.
Yeah, when it feels right.
Yeah.
And I think back to like when I started out, and there was stuff that I would be like, I want this to be moodier so badly that I would like black out the windows and set up lights inside.
Same. I remember I used to do that as a beginner. It's like, yeah.
And like I'll look back on that work, and it's like soft and like, you know, beautiful.
It's pretty.
It's pretty, but I'm like, it like feels so wrong to me now.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's so like unauthentic and plain, and like feels boring, and like I know the exact windows that I could have pushed light in through and like put units outside, but I never did that. And but that's also because I was like scared to make something ugly. Yeah. And like thought that I was like, I need my work to look beautiful, so people will be like, I want to hire this guy to make. Yeah. Because that's what good felt like to me.
Yeah, it's true. Like if you look at like Deacon's work, like you notice certain things that like if you were to point out traditional things of like they say the brightest part of the image should be the talent or whatever, should be the focal point.
I hate that.
And it's just like it's not true at all.
Yeah.
Like, and in traditional photography, I understand. Traditional portrait work, of course, okay, fine. Right? But like sometimes I just like just a splash of like there's a hard hit right there on the wall. And it's just like, why is that there? Right. And some people might look at that and be like, oh, well, like, shouldn't we flag that off or shouldn't we take that off? Like, no, like, that's the reason why you see this ambient. Like, let's say at nighttime.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things I always do is like think nighttime. I'm like, hit some hard light in there. One, the moonlight's hard. Two, it's like, how do you sell the ambient? Where's the bounce coming from? Like, everything's soft. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't, you know, it makes sense to have like a splash of hit where it's hard, and that hard is selling the ambient. You know, and that's like, sometimes it's hard for people to understand that because they just want to follow all the traditional rules of like, you know, soft here.
On the other
there.
side of that is like you get into really ugly like lighting when you don't have ambient at night and you just have lamps. But like that also allows you to light characters with the shape of a space.
Right.
Because you just have the space lit. Yeah. And then like everyone else is in silhouette, which I think Bradford Young does a lot in Arrival.
Yeah.
And like I think that's beautiful in its own way.
That's a different style. Yeah.
It's a totally different style, but it allows you to kind of like, the biggest thing that like whenever I find myself fighting what's authentic is when I get in the most difficult situations. Yeah. Because I'm trying to be like, I need to put a lamp here to get this exposure on this face, but it's like, but that face wouldn't be that exposed.
It wouldn't be, that's not the space.
It wouldn't be that bright because it's not the space. It's not actually how this is lit. Yeah. That's not how this space works. It's not how this space feels. And it's, those problems are often about like turning off and taking away lamps.
But that's the most difficult part of cinematography though, right? You got to hit those, make bad look good. Yeah. It's kind of like what they say about acting. Like, it's actually harder to act bad good.
Yeah.
You know? It's just like, it's just lighting. It's harder to hit light wrong good. Yeah. You know, like wrong. Traditionally wrong.
Traditionally wrong, but like right for the story.
Exactly, right for the story.
Which is difficult.
Because then your levels and like I find like, especially if you're not following the rules per se, like one little error in the way that your contrast levels look can really just screw up the entire thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of those things like, if you mess something up in a wide of a scene that's a big scene and you're like, that lamp is so bright or whatever. Yeah. Like that's a big thing that I'm always trying to be like, even a process on a scene, it's like land a camera, land the camera first, land the size of your wide first, look at what's happening. Absolutely. Like, you know, you've done all of your blocking, you know where all your marks are, like get in that process. Cause then like I've seen people like light stuff and then blocking comes up and they're like trying to get ahead so quickly and then it's something totally different and then it's like, wow, oh, we got to pivot, we got to take these lights outside, inside, and whatever. Yeah Do you have any like preferred lights? Like, are you owner operator, by the way? I know you own Amira, but like, are you owner operative lights and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, I have this Hudson Spiders, the Pixel Tubes, nice 1200D, 60X. I have this Mosey in the red back. And the next thing I want to get is 600X, but I'm waiting for that new spotlight.
Oh, yeah.
I have B7Cs, which I like a lot. That was also really helpful. Waiting for the new MC Pros too. Yeah. But again, like trying to get more hard lights. Like I almost bought another 1200, but I was like, I kind of want to wait for like a 1200X or like
which
something new.
We know it's coming, or 1200C probably is going to come.
It's going to come, and it's that same thing that I'm like, everything's in my house, so. Where am I? Like, I really think about where I'm going to put it. So, like, what's the next thing? Do I want another 1200D? Or, like, I would rather keep that space for 1200C that does something different, that does something more. So, I'm always trying to, like, add a new thing.
Do you get gear as, like, a business, like, as a business asset? Or is it more so you just love gear and you just like owning it?
There's, like, two things that were like more for me. Okay. And everything else has kind of been a business asset. And like that is like a fine, I try to be intentional with what I'm doing. Some stuff is like, this is a thing that I want. Right. Just personally, you just want it. I'll rent it out that much. Right. But I know I make that financial decision because I want to use it. And then there's other stuff that I'm like, I work with enough people that need this, and I need this enough.
You can add it to your kit fee. You know you're going to make money back.
I know I'm going to make money back for it. So
interesting. Like, so what is that gear? What's the stuff
like
that you make money from?
Astera tubes, right. The 1200D for sure. 1200D I bought like a month ago. It's already like 20% paid off. Nice. And like that's why I was like, well, honestly, it might make sense to buy another one. Right. But it's a space issue. Yeah. The spiders were like a thing I bought for myself. Interesting. Because I was shooting so much doc stuff. Yeah. And I travel so much that, you know, they're basically 2-point lighting kit that you can bounce in anything. But the best thing is that they're so small in a case.
And they look light
fold
and
out.
nimble.
Yeah, they're light, nimble.
Yeah.
They weigh so little. You use them on C-stands, but you can use them as top lights.
Because you can rig them easily.
You can rig them easily. Bounce them in umbrellas, build them into soft boxes. Like all of that was just like, it's the smallest light that can become the biggest light for me. Yeah. So I bought that originally that I was like, this is just for my doc stuff. And I would rent it out on the doc stuff. But it was more so I could travel and light well. Especially within budget. Like for some doc stuff I was shooting, you know, like 4 to 6 months at a time. And then for that, it's like, you can't rent a light for 6 months because you're buying the light at that point.
Yeah, at that point,
So it was like, what can I buy that would be worth it? And the spiders were great because they're like such a niche light that when they're like a big US light. So whenever somebody comes from out of town, I'll still get the rentals on that.
Interesting.
So they're not, the Redback's probably paid off, but the Mosey isn't. But it wasn't something I bought to pay off. I knew when I bought it, I was like, I'm just buying this because I want it.
Interesting. Interesting. So when it comes to like kit fees and like pricing yourself, let's get a little bit into that because I know a lot of people struggle with that, especially when they start up. How do you have a specific way that you priced? Are you just kind of going off of, you know, a feeling of like, this is what I want because it's just going to make it worth it for me to leave the house? Or do you have a very calculated like business approach or, you know, where you're like itemizing everything and that determines how much you go out for?
Yeah. So I have two worlds in which like I gaff and I DP.
Yeah.
And I very much know for a long time, I was very much gaffing to make money and DPing because I love it.
Yeah.
And those are two separate things. So it's like I'll DP for very little money when I was starting out, but I was gaffing because I wanted to make money. And those were like, I'm not going to come out and like gaff for free, but I might come out and DP because I want to do that project. And it feels like you're getting something back for that.
Yeah.
Over time, it became more about finding people I liked working with.
Interesting.
And that was like the most important thing was that like I like the people, I like their work, I valued being around them for 12 hours.
Right. Yeah, you got to be around them.
Because you got to be around them for 12 hours.
For a long time, yeah.
So that's a big thing. And I'd say in the past year that I've tried to be like just like super intentional about who I work with.
Yeah.
Not based on like what their credentials are or like what the project is as much as
so just based
like
off of who they are
as people. And I love that so much.
Yeah.
It's just been like the set days feel so good. I learned so much. I feel like I'm the most productive version of myself. I'm also like able to offer the most because I feel the most comfortable in that space.
Right.
And that's been great. Like Nick is like one of the people that I'm like, I will always like whenever Nick calls, I'm like, whatever you need. Like I'll move other shoots because he's just like a person I love working for and love working with. Like it feels like a collaboration. I always learn a lot from him. And he has such like, I don't learn a lot from him as a DP. I learn a lot from him as a person. He's just a good person.
He's just a really good person.
Yeah. Like one shoot, like he was just talking about how like he just feels like this is a thing where like you see someone else do a project that you wanted to do and you just feel bad about yourself because they're doing this bigger thing or they're younger than me and they're doing blah, blah, blah. He was just talking to me about being like everybody does a project that's right for them.
Yeah.
So you can't actually be upset about not doing a project because that project was the best. They were the best person for that.
Yeah.
And the project that you're doing, you're the best person for. So you have to value that.
Yeah.
And like actually be optimistic about it. And like that stuff is like, it's invaluable. Like I love working with him for those reasons more than it's like, I want to be like, see your lighting plans or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Right. So do you have like a specific, like, do you set a standard? Like I will not go out for this much at all. And I know you said in DP, you don't do it to make money. You do it because you love it. Do you still have like a set standard as to, you know, I will only go out for this much?
Yeah, there's like, so I have like a full itemized list of like what everything in my package rents for.
Right.
Like rental rate. Right. And I'll be like, this is the rental rate. And for commercials and stuff, I'll just rent it out for that. Yeah. And then if it's indie or whatever, then I'll start packaging. I'll just package things based on what they want and what I have and what they need.
Yeah.
And the big thing I try and do is like, I'll compromise my rate, but keep the gears rate the same.
Interesting.
So I'll be like, I'm giving you this deal. this is the gear rate, and then I'll come out for like this much.
And you only do that with projects that you're interested in doing, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
not
just
the
projects
project. Yeah.
So there's making money and like making art, and I try and be like, great, this is a project that I'm making money for. This is a project that I'm making art for.
Yeah.
And that stuff is like, what do we need, and what's realistic for me to ask for, or like sometimes like a lot of people help me in my career by like giving me gear for no money or very little money, and it's something that like I want to be able to do for other filmmakers too, and like I'm trying to be like I know some guys who AC'd for me and are trying to do their thesis film, and they have their school's Amira for 2 days, and they're like trying to get my Amira to fill out their thesis because they don't have enough shoot days to do it. And I was like, people did that for me. Like people did that for me when I was starting out, and I didn't have resources, so like whatever you have available is fine. And then like I want you to be able to make that. But then for my stuff, I try and be like, I think if I'm doing a camera package and stuff, I'll try and be like, this is $1,000.
Right.
And then this is your like percentage discount. And I always try and put the discounts in the invoice. So I'm like apparent about what is being tracked for.
So you're very transparent with like everything.
Yeah.
The way that you price it.
Yeah. And I'll send a gear list with prices and be like, this is everything.
Oh, wow.
Like,
do you ever run into issues though, where like perhaps someone might be like, oh, you know, I want to save a bit of money, so let's cut out the pixel tubes. Let's cut out this. Can we get away with this? Like, do you ever run into those problems?
Yeah. There's some stuff where like I'll lose rentals because I'm just like, this is it. And then they're like, oh yeah, we just got it from somewhere cheaper. And like, I'm like, okay, like that's also fine.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to try and get in a world of being like, what's the lowest rate in the city, and I'll beat it.
Yeah.
Because I also use my gear and like it, so like I don't want to get it beaten up. So pricing it is always trying to find like a big thing for me is also just like talking to people who are doing stuff that I'm doing. Like, how'd you price that out? And sometimes a big thing is just like when you start with somebody, it's hard to increase your rate relative to that.
It is.
So it's big to figure out what you think your rate is, because like that client will always see you for that rate, and you can change it variably, but you could jump your rate by 2,000 with a new client and it doesn't matter. And it's totally different than jumping your rate by 2,000 with the same client.
That's such an important like thing for people to understand, especially as a freelancer, that like clients don't give you raises. That's something that I've been trying to like tell people, like when you set a price, make sure you're going to be happy with that price for as long as you plan to be with them.
Yeah, because they'll think that's your price.
They'll think that's your price. They are not going to just say, you know what? I feel like you deserve $2,000 more a gig, so here you go.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't work like that.
And you can't really justify it to them. No matter what. Like you can't be like, I'm bringing this or that.
Yeah, you can't be like, oh, I bought this. But then they're like, we didn't ask you to buy it.
Exactly, right? You can't be, I got Titan tubes now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, I don't care. Like, you're still $1,000 a day.
$1,000 a day, yeah.
Right.
So, like, that's a big thing for me is, like, which should I learn the hard way? Like, price myself in the corners. And then, but I think that's a big thing is, like, now I'm trying to be like, one is have my gear priceless. So I can be like, this is the value on the table. Yeah. So, like, I don't have to explain that.
Yeah.
And they can go Google that on their own and see that that's true. Because some people just don't know how crazy expensive film shit is.
Yeah, they just don't know. Yeah. And it's our job to educate them.
Yeah. And if you just say, like, for you could be like, you know, this rental is $1,500. Yeah. And they're like, $1,500? I can buy a light off Amazon for $80.
Yeah.
But they don't know. Like, when you say, these are all the lights that I'm bringing, and these lights cost $60,000, it actually puts into perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, like sometimes you get caught in like an unfortunate situation where like I've had one situation, for example, where I told them, I was like, you're going to need a gaffer who or somebody who knows how to work DMX, right? If you want to do they want a certain kind of sequence, like sequential lights that change a certain way, a certain pace. I told them like, I'm not going to be able to do that through Sidus Link and Astera Next, you know, like it's not going to happen. So I tried to describe to the producer, like, you're going to need this, you're going to need that and this.
Lighting board off.
But instead I was like, no, we'll figure it out. And then when you get in set, it's like, it sucks because you're like, now one, I feel like I'm letting them down, even though I told them what it is. But at the same time, it's like, oh, it would have been cool. Like if we could have gotten your vision, I would have actually liked it. But now we're going in and unfortunately I can't make that decision. So now this sucks. And And now you're on set, like I'm sweating. I'm like trying to go through 2 apps. I'm going like this. And I'm like, hey, you go over there and press the button when I tell you to press the button. Yeah. And you're doing this and it just doesn't work out the same. And sometimes that's an unfortunate part of our business. You know, like you have to educate a client is key, but like sometimes they don't listen and you just gotta deal with shitty gigs.
And that's the other thing I try and do is like always trying to like not be the smartest person in the room. Which is a big thing for me too, but just trying to like learn all the time. So like a lot of our job as cinematographers is like educating everybody else on the technical side of it. And if you can be educated by your team on the technical side of it as well, as things change, as things advance, about like what your options are, is also huge.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a specific team that you go to, that you work with all the time? And how did you find that team?
Yeah, like right now, like I might have a feature in January.
Nice.
And like I have a crew that's in place for that. And that crew was like I think bits and pieces from like
just everywhere,
just different jobs that was like people again, like people that were just like good people, and that like I want to spend 3 weeks in January freezing cold with.
I want to chill with these people.
That like I think we would have fun. I think we would make something great together. And I think like the attitude of who you're working with affects you and the work you make so much.
Right.
So that's been a big thing for me. And I think most people I met were like just from being on set. And I think a lot of it was gaffing. Like a lot of it was
nice.
In that process of being like, you could just kind of could feel like who you liked working with from that place. Like from that place that helped me build the team that I wanted to work with when I was DPing.
So would you say like that the most important part of you building into being a good DP or being a DP who gets things like features and narratives and stuff like that from documentary to narrative is all based off of your networking ability? Would you say that's your biggest tool?
100%.
Oh, okay.
It's
all about connection, right?
All about connection. I think so little of like who you went to, what you did at school, like what work you did at school, and your real leaving school matters so much less than who you met at school and like who you know. And I know people who like I think who are much younger than me, doing way more than me because of like who they know from the schools they went to and the network they have in the city that like brought them opportunities to grow and learn faster. And I don't think that was because of like the reel they sent in. I think it was because just of who they know and who called them up.
So very little is actually to do with your reel, would you say?
I think so much. I think like you need a good reel, but a good reel is like
it's not enough.
It's not enough.
Right.
I think it's not enough. I don't think you can just do it just on a good reel.
Yeah.
I think you have the connection, and then a good reel seals the deal.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your calling card for the people who don't know you, I guess, in a way. If a producer had to be like convinced that they want to hire you.
Yeah. Like there's stuff that's like I had a producer, get me a job. And, my reel helped me book that job with the director because the director saw my reel and liked it.
And was like, okay, it bridges that connection.
They're like, I like your work. I like the way that you light.
Yeah.
I think you'll be a good fit for this project. But like, I couldn't have just sent my reel in cold. It was because that producer got me that in. Yeah. And then the reel sealed it.
Yeah.
Which I think is huge. Like, I think just who you know matters so much in this industry.
Have you ever got turned down because you haven't had ample experience in something?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Like we always joke about being like, I think I have this job, but because my real shit, it might not go through. Like, I don't know if there's anything that I actually haven't got because of a specific thing that I haven't done. But I feel like that's tough because you just like don't hear back from some things.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes when you get rejected.
Yeah.
And sometimes like I'm a little surprised sometimes when someone's like, hey, we got this food commercial that we want to do, and it's like just pure macros. I'm like, I have zero macro stuff in my like work. I don't know where you got this idea that I'm going to do this.
But then you like send your stuff in for something that you've done a ton of, and then you like don't hear anything.
You don't hear
from
anything
it,
from
and
it. You're like,
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So dealing with like rejection, I think that's one of the biggest, like hardest probably things that for most people to deal with. Like, do you ever have trouble dealing with that? Did it ever get to your head? And what kind of advice do you have for people who struggle with that?
Yeah, it was really hard for me. I feel like there was a lot of rejection on a lot of levels. Even just like coming in from stopping doing documentaries.
Yeah.
I was trying to get into camera department for a while, and like there were people who would like have me out, but I'd never get called back. And that stuff was like, I don't know why, but in film, it's like, I guess those people just didn't like me.
Right.
And there's not much you can do about that.
And in your head, you're like, did I fuck up?
Did I do something
wrong? Did I piss someone off?
Yeah.
Or like, yeah.
And you really start to feel that. And you really start to feel that way about it. And it's tough to like know what happened. But like that happens all the time. Like you just do something with somebody, and then, you know, even passive aggressively, not intentionally, but like, you know, you'll work with someone for a while, and then you'll see something on Instagram, they're working with somebody else, and you're like, did I piss that person off? Like,
yeah.
Why are they working with a new DP? Or like, why did they not call me out on this thing? Like, you don't know, but like sometimes you just feel that way.
Yeah.
I mean, a big thing for me was like before the pandemic, started going to therapy, and
nice.
That's just been huge for all facets of art and life.
Yeah. Was that mainly to deal with that type of like those thoughts of like self-doubt or like insecurity?
It wasn't for that.
Oh, okay.
That's not why I started going. But it's definitely helped me in just my own mindset, like how I view rejection, how I view failure, how I view myself. It's been helpful not only in that, but like just in helping me understand myself to be a better artist, and how I'm projecting myself into my work. But working, I think it's just hard, and there's no right way to deal with rejection because it's just there.
You just kind of got to keep going in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Like,
you just can't.
You can't think too hard on not landing a gig, or maybe the director that you thought you had a great connection with is now with a new DP in his stories, and you're like a little bit jealous.
You're a little bit jealous, yeah.
You guys are getting along a little too well.
But like that stuff, maybe it's just meant to be. Like maybe they're gonna make better films together.
It's just how it is.
And then you'll meet another director, like that door closes, another one opens, but it's tough because it hurts. It hurts in film because it feels very personal. Because you put so much of yourself out there.
And you find like you've gotten better with it just through experience, just from, you know, continuing to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just like, it's like you face a lot of rejection at the beginning, also because you don't know as much.
And you suck, and you think you're good.
You suck, and you think you're good, and then you don't get called back because you suck. And then you're like,
it's just how it is.
Oh, man, everyone hates me. Then you start to get better, and like people start to call you back more, and you start to learn more. And then like eventually you have more successes than failures and more callbacks than not. And it just starts to make sense and become more feasible. I think that's the best way around it, is just that like you'll face the most rejection at the beginning, but it just hurts the most then because that's all you're feeling, more of it because you're feeling so much of it. But like you start to get rejected less as you get better and you know more people. Like you start to build connections. When you just know no one, you go out and then you start dealing with rejection. It's tough, but there's no. I just think like film rejection is just like it's just like tough because you're dealing with it.
And I think you start to realize that like literally almost everybody in every aspect of film goes through it. Actors go through it.
The best thing, actually, that's true. The best thing about the deal with rejection is just listening to podcasts like this and know that everybody is going through the exact same thing.
Exactly. And that's the one thing I've noticed, like just the guests I've already spoken to, like everyone has the same things. Everyone goes through the same things, talk about the same things, and they talk about how their whole career was based off connections. You know, and then I've always like, you know, for even me, before I even started this podcast, sometimes I sit back and I'm thinking, am I crazy for like feeling this way? Am I like, is it just me? You know, like, am I nuts to think that like, you know, creativity and your talent at some point in your career becomes this much of the pie.
Yeah.
And it's so much more to the game
Mm-hmm.
that like doesn't matter how good you are, like you need to know how to talk to people, you need to know how to network with people, you know. And I think that's why, you know, big reason we spoke about before we started recording that this podcast is all about. It's all about being introducing you to people and like kind of just expanding your horizons, because I know a lot of times we like to work with the people we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And we
And you know
stick
who you
with those
know.
people. You ride or die with those people, almost to the point where you're like, if I can't get so and so on this, I don't want to do it.
I don't. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes that's a detriment to your business. Ultimately, you got to expand your horizons. You know, maybe, you know, okay, my key grip can't do it, or my gaffer can't do it. Maybe I'll call Jason. I thought he was pretty cool on the podcast. So
Yeah, and you like
you know.
that thing too. Like even for me is like I think that like listening to this podcast, like I'll meet new people, but like I'll learn stuff from them because they're not in my circle, and the people I work with all work a certain way, and I know that way of working because I'm in that world or like that tier of commercials or that tier of features.
Yeah.
And then you when you expand your horizons, you work with some you never worked with before, and they start coming up with some crazy stuff that you never thought of, and you're like, oh, that's great. I never would have done that. And they go, yeah, because this guy from Ottawa that I work with all the time does it that way. And, and you start to learn from like branching out, which is tough because I like love the people I love, but it's also like the community is so big.
It's so big. And like you almost handicap yourself when you restrict yourself from everybody else. And I think one of the key things that I want to do is be able to even get people on the lower tiers. I don't mean that as disrespectful, but like, you know, like people who perhaps don't work on bigger budget productions at the same time, because sometimes those people can kind of remind you of things that you probably forgot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they remind you, sometimes they're the most hungry people sometimes. And you inspire a little bit from that. Like, man, I remember I used to be that passionate, you know, and, you know, in moments when you feel burnt out. But burnout is actually one thing I do want to get to, because I know that's a very common thing in this industry. So I want to get a little bit into burnout. Have you ever experienced burnout, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah. I have a hard time saying no to work. Which is tough, and especially in film.
Yeah.
I think
even when you're not qualified, even if you feel you're not qualified for it, you just say yes.
Like, in what way?
Well, I mean, like, let's say it's a way above your head. Say it's something that you've never done before, or like you're not familiar with whatever the concept might be, or you know, I don't know what that might be. You know, everyone has their own personal challenges, but like, if you feel like you're not the right person for the job, would you just something you just still say yes to?
No. The only thing I can think of is like somebody was like, "Do you do car rigs?" And I was like, "No, I don't do car rigs."
That's a good example. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
that I won't do. But like, I just have a hard time saying no to work to pace myself.
I see
from that side of it,
right?
And I think I noticed like even right now, to be honest, is like usually by this time of year, like it's starting to die down.
Yeah,
and like. It's tough as a filmmaker because then like January, February comes around, you're not working at all, and you're like, I'll never work again. Why did I ever say no to work? And like in reality, you should be like enjoying that time and like relaxing
because
and preparing,
you're about to go hard
because it's about to go crazy for another 8 months. So I'm still like trying to find the balance of being like, I don't know, like, oh, I have some time off, and that's actually a good thing. I should use that to rest. But I'm so anxious that I'm like, what am I going to do with that time off? Like, I should be looking for work. I'm going to like start looking at more investments. I'm going to start looking at gear investments, like look at my portfolio, and like try and stay busy all the time. And what usually happens is I just get sick and then I rest.
So you work until your body just...
Yeah, and then I get sick for like 5 days. Then I go, oh yeah, I you guys haven't slept very well in 2 months and taking any time off.
Yeah. So I guess you're just something you just kind of deal with. Burnout is just something that you've gotten used to acclimating to or accommodating for.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any good advice on how to deal with it, because it's something I still am trying to deal with.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to just be more intentional with the type of projects I take. So I did a feature in September, and they asked me to do a feature right after in October.
Yeah.
And I was like, no.
Yeah.
Because I want to take time to rest.
Right.
And like that was a big step for me, because I was like, that's guaranteed work. Like whatever, like 20 days straight. I don't have to look for work.
Yeah.
And then like I ended up actually making more money doing commercials and working like a third of the days.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I just had to actually say no because it was the right thing
Just
for me.
know that other opportunities are going to be
will come.
there.
And it was stuff that like I don't even think about. People call me for jobs the next day, and it was great because I was available because I wasn't doing that other thing.
Yeah.
And then I actually was resting because I was intentional at the time.
Yeah.
So I do try and be intentional about my time off now when I'm not working. That's not a bad thing. Doesn't mean I'm a bad filmmaker or like I suck at my job. Someone wants to hire me.
Yeah.
Like I try and be like, this is a good thing for you. Like, what are you going to do with this time off? Like, you're going to like go for a run. You're going to work out. You're going to watch movies, like hang out with friends. Like, how can you rejuvenate yourself in this time off? So the biggest thing is trying to be intentional. A thing I do in therapy a lot is like do a pie chart about how I'm spending my time.
Interesting.
And I got in the habit of doing that and be like, okay, like if I looked at my week, like how much time did I spend doing where 100% of my time go?
Yeah.
Like spend it with friends, spend it with family, spend it working, spend it exercising, whatever. And that helps me focus, just being more aware of like how I'm spending my time and being intentional about that.
Yeah. Do you struggle with balancing like a personal life, like a girlfriend or anything like that? Like, do you ever have trouble balancing the other side of life?
Yeah, I think I've gotten a lot better at it right now.
Oh,
This
okay.
is like maybe the best I've been at it.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's because of that. I try and be really intentional with that. But I also know when I'm really busy and really tired, then I get really bad at communicating. So like I stop messaging people that much and I'm like, well, I'll see you, but it's not really any time to see you.
Yeah.
Because I just want to like rest on the weekends. So then like, what is there to really talk about?
Right.
And I would get really bad at that cycle, like just not communicating with people in my life. And like, then like now I'm pretty good with my girlfriend about being like, this is the projects I'm on.
Yeah.
And because of that, then she's super aware of like how busy I am. And I'm like, I'm about to do a feature for like 3 weeks. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be that busy. I'm not going to be that available or talking that much. But then after that 3 weeks, like I'll be much more present.
So you have to make that assertive effort to be like, okay, I'm gonna take these 3 weeks to do work, but then the next 3 weeks, I'll just be home.
I'll be more present or like whatever. And like for this, like when I'm doing a feature, I'm like, we'll have Saturdays together with my girlfriend.
Interesting.
And that's gonna be like our time. And then I'll try and really be present with her on Saturdays because when I'm off, I just finished the week. Sometimes it's tough because you're like tired your first day off feature. But I'll try and be like, okay, this is our time together. This is what we're gonna do. But then it's tough to find the balance of being like, hey, it's one day off. This is with my girlfriend. Then like one more day off. I gotta see like all my family, all my friends, like whatever else. I don't know what the right
squeeze
thing.
it all in.
I gotta squeeze it all in.
I
don't know what the right thing to do is. I don't know if there's like a proper answer, but I think it's just like the best thing is like trying to communicate with everyone in my life when I'm busy. If I'm not physically there, how can I still like be there for them and find that balance?
Was this everything you expected as like when you said you're going to become a filmmaker? Is that this the life that you kind of envisioned?
Not at all. And I'm constantly terrified that I made the wrong decision to get into film.
And why is that? Why are you terrified?
Like so like I was in economics and finance at UFT.
Okay.
And I wanted to do a lot of social justice work in economics. I wanted theory like work for Bank of Canada, and that made me kind of be like, oh, what could I do more internationally? Then I was like, work for the World Bank or the IMF, and then it was like, oh, these are really terrible organizations. I actually don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Then I was like, what could I do? Like then you get into like UNICEF or like UN, like all of these more like political sides that are going to allow you to do social justice. And somewhere in that world, I was trying to figure out like, how can I make the world a better place? How can I be helpful? And at that time, I had a friend who spent 2 weeks in a straitjacket to raise money for Parkinson's research.
Wow.
And I filmed a doc on that with him. And I was like, this is the most fun I've had working. And we raised $15,000 for a charity. And if there's a way that I can leverage that into making a career and making the world a better place, that would be the best.
So you used it as a tool to ultimately spread what you wanted to, a message that you wanted to spread.
I wanted to. And
Interesting.
I just felt like film was a really powerful tool because it put a spotlight on issues.
Right.
And if I could use it to put a spotlight on issues that I think matter,
then
I would prefer putting my life's work towards that than
So
like working in an office.
Is that why you initially went to documentary, because it's almost like a direct like translation to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Because narrative is a little different though, right? Narrative, I guess, unless you're the director or you're the writer, it's a little bit, as a DP, I would imagine it's a little bit tougher to spread that message. So are you more selective with the scripts you work with, or what other ways do you express that? What other ways can you express that?
Yeah, so like with documentary, it was like very literal, like
Quite
Syrian
literal.
referees coming to Canada. This is the doc we're doing. With narrative, I try and be really selective about the scripts. I find like narrative. What affected me was like, let's say something like Spotlight, where I was like, this is a great message. This is a true story. Even something like, for me as an economics major, was The Big Short,
Right.
which I think there's truth in the movie, but it makes it digestible to a big audience. And narrative is big for that. At the time, even when I was doing documentary, like I don't think documentaries were even as big as they are now. Like how many people are consuming them the way they are now.
Yeah.
So it was like narrative was a space where you could get a large audience to actually look at something and maybe potentially change their mind, change their perspective, change the world through that.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that was what drew me into doing more narrative stuff now, is that it's like, are you going to get a bigger audience, and does that mean you can have a bigger impact in the message you're trying to make?
Right.
But I think it's much harder because documentary is so literal. You're
It's
like
so
right
direct,
in there,
yeah.
direct with the issue.
Right.
Like narrative, you're kind of like being around the bush with it,
Right.
in some ways. But I feel like something like The Big Short, like that explains the 2008 financial crisis to a lot of people who like didn't actually understand what that meant.
Yeah.
But like having a movie like that at a time right now when you have a pandemic and we're probably going into recession in 2023, like does that educate people and change the way that we view our financial system?
Yeah.
Because of that narrative film. So narrative for me is like when you have something like Spotlight, it's like, oh, you showed a lot of people in the world what was happening in the church and how it was happening in the church and how it was neglected and how it wasn't reported. So can I do narrative in a way that I think is spreading a message, or using film as a tool to put a spotlight on something that I think matters?
Yeah. I think talking about like intention and just having a mission behind why you're doing this is, I think that's something that is a missing piece in a lot of, I would say, up and coming filmmakers. I find that a lot of people do it because they think it's cool, or, they think, I want to create the next, biggest social media fucking trend or whatever, and the intention is so important because I feel that's what keeps you going, right? That's what keeps you when things get tough. It's your mission that keeps you aligned with everything. So when you're facing rejection and you're facing problems with your girlfriend because you can't spend a Saturday with her, and she's yelling at you, it's easy to break if you're just, those things can break you. You know, even people's opinions of your work. Like all of us have always faced how hard is it to face critique, or like someone just being straight up an asshole and being like, yo, you suck, or this it's like shit. Like, we all face those things. And I think it's those battles that you face internally that you have to remind yourself of why you do this. So I think it's always been very important that you have an intention, just like how you have an intention, how you want to affect the world. I've always said that I've always wanted to change the world too through my work, and that's what will keep you going in this industry. It doesn't guarantee you success, but it allows you to keep doing it.
Yeah. That reminded me of when I was really feeling like stuck gaffing and like I wasn't DPing that much. And I was talking to another DP and he talked to me about there's things in life that are infinite games and things in life that are finite games. And finite games is a game like baseball, which has a beginning and an end.
Right.
And there's a winner and a loser. And there's infinite games, which are things that are like the game of life. And in life, there are certain games that you don't win or lose. It's just about staying in the game as long as you can.
Interesting.
And for him, he was like, I thought about cinematography like that. I'm not trying to get anywhere. There's no end goal. It's just about like being in the game as long as I can. And every time I'm in the game, still I'm winning.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me because you really stop thinking about being like, I need to do my first feature. I need to do my first 10 features. I need to do a Nike commercial because it's not about that, and that's not why we're filmmakers.
Right.
It's about wanting to be a filmmaker and then being a filmmaker. And as long as you're doing that and you're working towards that goal and you're in the game, you're winning.
Very being present and just being in the moment and enjoying the life of a filmmaker in a lot of ways, just experiencing it. Yeah, you're right. Because I know I've had like people have asked me before, and I sat there, I'm like, why can't I answer them? Where they say, what's your goal? And I'd be like, I don't have one. And it'd be like, like I would love to hit milestones. Every one of us wants to win an Oscar. Every one of us wants to work on like the next big feature with like the feature Scorsese's and Christopher Nolan's. Obviously, like all of us want to do that. But like, even if I hit that, like, I don't think that's what I want. Like, I want it, but I don't.
It would be nice,
It'd
but
be
it's
nice,
not the
but it doesn't end all be all. I'm
Yeah.
keep on going. And a lot of it is just like, it's almost like this work is therapeutic to my life. It keeps my life going. It gives a purpose in a lot of ways. So I don't want to stop doing it no matter what it is,
I want to be in the game. I want to keep doing it. I want to keep feeling like I'm making the world a better place.
Exactly.
Like I keep wanting to like work on myself and use that to change my work.
Yeah.
I want to use my work to change me. And like, as long as I'm able to do that, then you're like, it's tough to be like, once I get this job or once I get a rep, then I made it.
Then I made it. Yeah, exactly. And it's not, it's like those accolades are great. And I think those are achievable accolades for everybody that wants to get there, but it's not everything. And I've always said like, you don't grow to grow as an artist. You don't grow as an artist. You grow as a human, and it's the artist is an expression of the human and who you are. And I think that's a natural evolution throughout your whole life. It doesn't end, like you're just gonna, as you grow as a human, you might start looking at lighting a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe from, who knows, 50-year-old Jason could turn into a high key guy.
All of a sudden those waveforms are all up there.
Waveforms are all the way up there. Now he's pushing that Alexa 35. Like he's going for those highlights.
They're clipping those windows.
Exactly. Like we never know. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about this game is that there isn't a way to kind of rate a cinematographer.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, like, I don't think you can compare cinematographers. I don't think it's not a sport. It's not like, Jason hit a sick fucking hard light. Ding, that's 2 points. Like it's not like, oh, what is it, 5 to 6? Like you can't
look at those ratios.
look at those ratios.
Oh man, that's 2.8 to 1.4.
You know how hard that 2 to 1. That's 3 points right there. Like you can't rate it. It's because at the end of the day, how you express a scene will be completely probably different from how I express a scene.
Yeah.
What's wrong is right doesn't really
matter. And that's also why you can't like look at other artists in your field and feel bad for yourself for not being where they are.
Which is so common.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah. And we all do it, but you really understand like what being a good cinematographer means as like, it means that you're putting yourself into your work.
Yes.
And you're using the way that you see the world to influence this film.
Yeah.
So then like, why do you care what they did? Like, why does it matter that they did that thing? Because they're putting themselves into the world to do that. Like that, when you think about cinematography like that, then it seems so ridiculous to be like, well, I want to do that thing because it was cool or they had a big client.
It's true. And the thing is like, something that I've learned in the last 2 years personally is learning to be happy for people.
Yeah.
And because it's so like community versus competition, that's a very difficult like topic to navigate in our industry because we are like cinematographers are rather saturated in a lot of ways because everyone could just pick up a camera and be like, yeah, turn on light, got paid a couple $100. I'm a cinematographer now. Like it's very saturated, but like understanding that the competition really isn't even competition. I feel like if it's not really about beating competition, rather it's about creating a community. And one thing that I've been really working on is like, you know what? I've faced the same emotions. Like I sit there, I'm like, man, this person's like doing this, like that should be me, And you kind of get into that mindset and you're like, that's a really negative hole to be diving down.
And I'm really happy that this person got to do
that.
You
gotta sit there, what? I'm happy for this person. You know what? And the one thing that I've been doing a lot is like, look, I don't care. You call me as a PA. If I have time, I will come out. I don't care. I just want to work with good people. And I want to spend my life on good sets with good people.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And hopefully that leads me to,
where
I want to be.
And like take the ego out of it. Which is huge. And that's the same thing, like trying to be like, I want to work with good people and I want to be intentional about that. And the more I can do that, the more I can really and like look back on a month and be like, I loved everyone I worked with.
Yeah.
Not just like I did a union show and that paid well.
Yeah.
And then like, what was the point? I might as well stay in economics at that point, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So do you have any like advice that you can say like for people who are going, I know we talked a lot about it and probably just going to be a little more of a recap of what you said, but like, do you have anything specific? If someone says, hey, I want to be a cinematographer, do you have any advice for those people?
I think like the same advice that I got was like go to therapy, understand yourself, like really spend time with yourself, know who you are, know why you're doing what you do, what you want to do. And it's not about like what kind of films you want to make as much as just like what kind of impact you want to have in the world, and then use that to lens the kind of films you want to be a part of. I think so much of it that we get caught up in the technical aspects of being a cinematographer, and we forget about the emotional aspects of being a cinematographer, and how much of yourself you need to put into that. So I think that side of it is like really spend time with yourself, really get to know who you are. Spend time alone with yourself, like meditate, journal, all of that stuff is like super important when it comes to thinking about how you influence a film and how you influence your work. And like, you actually think about the intention of that stuff later on when you're trying to figure out like why this angry mom is lit this way, because you actually thought about like how you felt about your mom when she was angry.
Right, exactly. Because a lot of times when you light something, it has a lot to do with internally how you feel in a lot of ways. So when you're lighting something, angry mom, for example, like how you shape the light, what light you use, what contrast ratios you use, what lens you use, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, that to me is angry mom.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of definition of who you are inside and how you define an angry mom.
Yeah.
Right. And if you were a totally different Jason or a totally different Danny, like, and you were, whatever, much darker, perhaps this changes. Perhaps the ratios change. Perhaps the colors change. Perhaps things change. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like working on yourself will help you become a better cinematographer.
And you become more connected with that. And I think it allows you to be more intentional. Like if you can stand by your images, then there's like nobody can tear that apart for you.
Yeah.
If you lit that a certain way because that's what felt right to you, like you can learn from it and people can say their own suggestions, their own notes, but like that the biggest thing is that like you went from yourself to the image. And as long as you can keep building that relationship with you and the image, like the sky's the limit, because that's all you can do as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And then like the technical stuff, you just learn along the way. And I think like even for me, I got caught up with the technical stuff. I got scared that I didn't know the technical stuff or that there was so much more to it.
Yeah.
And that stuff is like, oh, you just go out and set and like learn from people.
You just eventually
and
learn.
You just figure it out. And that's the easy stuff. Like the hard stuff is knowing like, the hard stuff is like, yeah, you can get torn apart because you used the wrong like white balance and lighting the angry mom or whatever, because that's not what you meant to do.
Yeah.
But if you meant to do it because because your mom felt orange, because it felt tungsten, because there wasn't a lot of windows in your house growing up and everything was lit by lamps inside, then then there's no breaking that. And that's just what it is to you. Yeah. And it's so much easier to stand by your process when you like feel more connected to yourself versus when like for you too, like when you were saying like you were coming up thinking a lot about like who you are and like why you want to make the world a better place, that like what influence your work endlessly more than it will like knowing whatever f-stop this unit is.
Yeah. And it goes back to like not being able to compare your work with everybody else, or not making it intentional that you don't do something like that, because a lot of times who you are is on that paper, is on that image. It might not be the most prettiest thing in the world or the prettiest way to light it, because you can tell a noob cinematographer when they tell you, oh, you should have wrapped the light a little bit more. You should put a little kicker, and like, no, eye light
and
next time would be nice. And they're pushing the 3-point lighting on you, the YouTube light, on you, and then you're like sitting there like, yeah, I don't think this person knows. Like they're clearly a noob. Like they're newer in the industry, because it's like a lot of times it's just what, like you say all the time, if what feels right. And if you're able to break down your work and understand and know that every little bit is intentional, then at that point, I think it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or what they do. you're making work that you're proud of. And
Yeah.
I think that is going to keep you going. That's what's going to evolve you the most as a cinematographer is being aware of why you do something. Because a lot of times someone can just put a light somewhere and be like, oh, that looks cool, and hit it. We've all done that. Like as a noob, I put a light by accident somewhere. I'm like, well, yeah, this looks great. You know, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
You know, so I think intention is huge
It's
as a
huge.
cinematographer.
And knowing why. And it's one of those things that comes back to one, like why lighting plans are great.
Yeah.
Because it like teaches you the technical side, but also why they're terrible. Because at the same time, like if you really think about what we're talking about now, like how can you use someone else's lighting plan? If you're telling me why an angry mom looks like an angry mom to you and why it looks like an angry mom to me,
I can't even imagine
like,
that. Yeah.
How does that ever make sense to reuse somebody else's lighting plan?
Yeah.
But like maybe it taught you something because of a technical problem where like for me, I'm thinking about like you have south facing windows, how you gotta work around that to get a certain shape of light or like block out the sun or whatever. But then like the emotion of a scene can never be replicated because it's so much about who you are.
True. And you're not doing the same project.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to take Jason's lighting plan because I'm not doing the same project that Jason was shooting.
Which is weird. Like when people talk about being precious about their lighting plans or precious about like,
I'm like,
what filters are you using? Like, I'm not going to tell.
Yeah. Like this is my secret filter,
sauce.
but
like,
it's on B&H and everyone can buy it.
And I'm like, yeah, exactly. It's like, who's that for? Like, what are you, what are you hiding it for? Because it's you. Like you chose that filter because that like, that's what that felt like to you.
Yeah.
Or that's how you feel that time. And I think even like the more I can separate now is like trying to be like, okay, if I can separate myself from a story, then like what feels like the right lighting for the story. And then what, like I go through the process of putting myself into it and then go through the process again, like taking myself out of it. Like, what is a dirty basement that you want to move out of because your mom, you feel resentful of your mom. And what does it feel like for that person? And then you go back to like, what does it feel like for me? And what does that feel like in the story?
Exactly.
And like that dialogue is always super helpful for me. And that's the same thing why I'm like, there's nothing like narrative because where else can you do that?
Where else can you do that stuff? It's true. And you know, like go back to the lighting plan thing. Like you said, like if I tell you that I used, you know, a half grid on the window, like you're just going to put a half grid up. Like you even know, like, you know what it does. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like if you're not able to completely understand why you use that light, like you can use a 1200D or you can use M18. Yeah. Right. But if I tell you to use a 1200D, does that mean you're just automatically into use 1200D? No, maybe M18 is more your thing. You know, like it just so much like for breakdowns to me, it almost doesn't matter. I've always said like you can know exactly what I do, but you'll never know how I think. Yeah. And you can never step into my mind of how I feel on set. Like it's just you have to be you. Yeah. And never try to replicate somebody. Never try to be the next Jason. Be the next you. Yeah. And there's always just this pick. Like the one thing that I do when I look at people's work is I always look at like, why did they do it? And I just try to learn and understand it. You know, or sometimes it could be very technical, very straightforward. Like I like how you use this on this texture. Yeah. I wonder what cloth you used to get that shadow
that fall
texture.
Off or
yeah, or that fall off. Like small technical things like that. But like I'm not going to specifically use it on an angry mom scene just because you used an angry mom scene. Yeah. You know, it's more so like, oh, I've seen Jason do this before. It looked really nice. And so like maybe it'll apply for me in the future. And when I need
stuff's
it.
Nice because it's like, oh, maybe I'll add that to my package for the next thing. You try it out. Yeah. What was that? Oh, that was a magic cloth. Okay, cool. I'll put that in and try it on something else. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. But
anyway, I know we didn't really get to break down any work. Did you want to talk a little bit about your demo reel?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about it?
I don't. It was just more so, I guess. Just you know, I think a lot of it was answered. You know, like a lot of it was just like your style and why you went down. I think you answered a lot of it.
Yeah. I mean, my reel I think is pretty moody. Yeah. Which is very
immediately
much,
like your first shot is like silhouette.
It's silhouette basically through a window.
And it gives everything that I think is you. It's like halation and like kind of like a cooler tone and.
That's the one thing that I always really try and play with is that like I feel like light is very rarely white, and trying to play with that like legitimately and like from technical side of like trying to balance stuff. Camera at 4300 so that like tungstens can feel tungsten and daylight can feel like daylight. Yeah. Because
that blue
like
orange
here,
push a little bit.
Like nothing is like white really. Yeah. You're like all right, that's actually blue. That's actually a little orange. Yeah. Like. Those are a little green, and like because of that, nothing feels like it's actually white in relation to anything. So I'm always trying to play with like just like not that teal, not that cyan orange
Right.
look, but like just playing colored light as colored light, and not being like tungsten is tungsten, daylight is daylight, but like having that color blend into space. But that moodiness is something that I'm like, that's what feels really right to me. And sometimes I'm trying to take my ego out of it or like go against what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I also wonder how much of that is just like reflected in like the way I see the world.
Right.
And like the way I see the shape and like if that'll change, if I just like, as I get older, start to see the world differently and start to feel like I'm like, want this high key lighting or like whatever. I don't know, but I feel like that my reel really says a lot from that side of me and how I see like shape and contrast so much.
Yeah. Was a lot of the stuff on your reel like actual paid work, or was it spec, or like what mix ratio do you have there?
I want to say all of it is paid work, except for like 1 or 2 music videos that I think I just like, my friend was like, yo, I made this song, you want to shoot a music video? And
Okay,
like,
cool.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And then everything else has been like short films, documentaries, some like indie features. And there's like, that was like, I feel like the most I like tried to find a variety of stuff, because I'm always trying to like, I just felt like I was always trying to do narrative work, because narrative felt like just like you had the most of yourself to put into it. But then I was trying to make like a really narrative reel.
Yeah.
But then this one I was just like, oh, I've done a bunch of stuff. And I just want to put like
So you just
everything
wanna
in
put
there.
everything. It's an interesting approach, because I hear a lot of different like philosophies when it comes to reels, right? Some people are like niche into one thing and only into that, and be known as like the chicken nuggets guy.
Yeah.
You know, and then you got like the other ones where it's like, oh, make it as wide variety as possible. And then you got other people like make specific ones for like narrative,
documentary,
blah, blah, blah. So it's really interesting and fascinating to see how people, you know, approach your demo reel.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is like politics and business side of it.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like because of the way I view cinematography, a lot of cinematography is about who you are.
Yeah.
So I try and make my reel about being like who I am as a cinematographer, like how I see things.
Oh,
and like having a good combination of like I think I'm pretty binary with stuff.
Yeah.
Like punctuation, master primes. Like it's super speeds with double fog, or it's super clean. And like I try and really show that in there, that there's like this really crisp stuff or this really funky stuff. And like show my range of work of what kind of stuff I like to do and what kind of shape I like to have. But I know like you saying that commercial stuff, I remember talking to Jeremy Benning when he was doing commercials. And he was telling me like he would get like offered like a hamburger commercial, and they'd be like, show me your like Wendy's hamburger reel. Like, I want to see that specific
I've heard
thing.
stories like that too.
Like that, only that. And it's like, that's crazy. But like also to work in that world, then do you need to be like the hamburger guy and like your whole website is just hamburgers? Like
that's fascinating, because I've always said about him, like, is that what you want? You know what I mean? Like, do you want to just shoot hamburgers? And I understand like you're not just shooting hamburgers, but that becomes like your thing that you do. I guess it's in a lot of ways we face it too down here, I guess, where like you're the corporate guy, and the corporate's what makes you money, and then you do the other stuff on
for
the side.
fun, or like.
So I guess it's just kind of part of the game.
Yeah, and I feel like there's always like, even the thing I get worried about that you talked about, where you're like, I just want to like PA or do whatever and work with good people. But then like the industry feels like it is like, oh, so you're a PA now.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to get caught up in that typecast.
Then it's like, and you get typecast so much in everything that you do. And like, even for me, where I'm like, there's people I love gaffing for because I learn a lot as people and technically, and there's people I love having as gaffers with me when I DP, but like, I like being able to go between those two.
Yeah.
But like it feels like people really just want to typecast you. Like, what are you? Are you an AC? Are you a gaffer? Are you like, who is this person?
Do you think that's changing though? Do you think with like the modern filmmakers coming up, that they have a realization that like well, one time I went on set and like literally the grip was a great DP. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, I saw people's profile. I'm like, all of you guys are like amazing DPs or amazing or whatever, something else. And I'm like, but you're a grip.
But you're also a grip. And like I did a feature with David in August, and it was like, you know, me, do you know Joel Del Monte? That
name sounds so
who's
familiar.
also great. Like,
yes,
like
yeah,
the whole crew basically was all DPs.
Yeah.
But like also all doing G&E.
Yeah.
And it's like a testament to where times are now that it's like
It's changing.
It's changing. Like you can, and I hope it continues to be that way. But like
I hope
you don't
so.
have to be typecast. And
I hope
like,
so, because then it's like, like I find, at least for me, I mean, I could be totally like stereotyping DPs here, but like I find DPs are some of the most humble people in the industry.
Yeah,
they're the most soft-spoken people, and I enjoy being around DPs.
Yeah.
But like, there's only one DP.
There's only one DP.
There's
That's
only
the
one.
thing. Is like you don't get to work with other DPs when
Exactly.
you're DPing, and like that also creates a problem for me where it's like you only know what you know then.
Yeah.
Like how are you gonna learn? Like then you do rely on your crew and your team to like help you, but like where you get so much more from like seeing another DP like run through blocking and like see the way they communicate with their crew, and like you can take stuff from that. And you lose that opportunity when you get typecast. And you have to be like, I only want a DP, and then
I don't know that you can survive in the modern film industry these days if all you say is I just want a DP. I think it's tough to navigate that world unless like I think everyone starts somewhere. You have to make your way up regardless, whether you go down the videography route or you go down documentary route or you go down the union route or freelance route. It doesn't really matter. I think in order so you have to get there. You have to understand DP is a high position. It's you're a department lead, you're a director. It's in the name. So it's like, you're not going to just get it. Like you have to understand every element of art and every element of the art department and the G&E department, the camera department, for obvious reasons. And there's even somewhat sound. Like I know you don't have to know sound, but like you have to know how to work with them.
Be considerate of it.
You have to understand how they operate. And you don't do that from just saying I'm just going to be DP.
I'm just going to DP, and like even editing, like you have to work blocking. You have
you have to understand
angles,
coloring. You have to understand what your footage is able to do and working with colorists and the post process,
and like what codecs and all of that. Like there's so much, and like there's stuff that it's like I always try and think of it through the lens of being like, how does this really affect my ability to tell a story? So like, how much do we need to know about lenses? Because like you get the lens manual and like lose your mind. Like, but like at what point does it stop being useful to the storytelling process?
Right.
But because you need to know so much about so many different things. But it's crazy too because like we think at like, at 21 we should be shooting Nolan's film. But like then you think about how much is happening on the scale of that. To be like, you kind of have to be like 40 to like
because you need
know
experience.
enough.
You need the time and the experience to like really hash out everything.
To like grow as a person and grow and experience and have like had failures and like use that to get to that level of scale. But it's also crazy because there's like super young guys doing it. And
I mean, there's a different side of the world now. I think there's also that social aspect of things. Like the social media has really accelerated a lot of this. Like if you're able to, you can build your connections through social media these days, right? So you don't almost necessarily have to be the most technical DP. But if you know how to network and you have a following and you have this and that, you get the call, like you can be the next DP. So there's different approaches and different ways to get into it these days. It's an open-ended book, but I think what we discussed today is very important, is knowing more than just the business side of things, but also understanding that it's more than just creative as well. And you finding a balance of both.
I remember when I was starting out, I thought if I made the sickest reel, then everyone would just be calling me up.
Exactly.
Like they'd just see it and then they'd be like, your stuff's great. Let's shoot something. Like, and like, that was just like, it was just brutal. You just got to know people.
Because then you look around, man, everybody's good.
Everybody's good.
Everybody's good. When you hit a certain level, it's like, fuck, like everyone's talented. And it's really easy to make yourself feel small. But you're right. Everyone has that aspiration when you're first creating your first reel and you're like, I'm going to do this and everyone's going to call me.
Call me up. My phone's going to be blown up. This reel looks great.
And then you realize only a small bit of that pie.
Oh, yeah.
So man, that was a great conversation, man. I think we are well over time, but no, like really honestly appreciate you coming, man, and appreciate you sharing your insight. We've always connected well on the tech spec nerd shit, and It's awesome seeing you grow, like from where I first met you. It was
Yeah,
like,
thank you so much.
Jesus Christ. Like we both met on like when we were both like working documentary corporate type stuff.
Yeah.
I guess you can say. And yeah,
It's crazy because we
small
met.
world.
We were everything we talked about was so technical.
Yeah.
And now we have everything we talked
The
about is so
experience is
emotional.
coming in now. Yeah, we're not just talking about lenses.
About
We're
lenses
talking
and
about
lights.
experience, and it ends up going full circle of like, oh, Jason knows this guy, and Jason knows that guy. And it's like it becomes a small world.
Yeah, which is great. Like I love that, and I love that you're doing this to like actually bring a community of Toronto filmmakers together.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't think there's much of that in Toronto. I know there's a lot of podcasts, like Roger Deakins has a podcast, Warner GP has his podcast. Like there's a lot of people that have the podcast, but in Toronto, I feel like there's missing that element, a little bit of connection. And obviously the last 2 years have been tough for a lot of people, and this industry got hit really hard, and especially for me. And so like, finding ways to connect and helping people find ways to connect, I think are really important.
Yeah.
And the lessons that like come from people like you who've been through a lot, who've grown so much in the last 2 years, like it's important for people to realize that like if you haven't been through it, be ready.
Yeah.
And if you have been through it, you're not alone.
Yeah,
So yeah, man. Thanks, man.
of course.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.